scansion or a system of scansion is the act of determining and graphically representing the metrical character of a line of verse. In classical poetry, these patterns are based on the different lengths of each syllable, and in English poetry, they are based on the different levels of stress placed on each syllable. In both cases, the meter often has a regular foot. Over the years, many different systems have been established to mark the scansion of a poem. Overview: systems of scansion, and the assumptions that underlie them, are so numerous and contradictory that it is often difficult to tell whether differences in scansion indicate opposed metrical theories, conflicting understandings of a line's linguistic character, divergent practical goals, or whether they merely constitute a trivial argument over who is the better ear for verse. To understand any form of scansion, it is necessary to appreciate the difference between meter and rhythm. The rhythm of language is infinitely varied. All aspects of language contribute to it: loudness, pitch, duration, pause, syntax, repeated elements, length of phrases, frequency of polysyllabic words. As C.S. Lewis observes, if the scansion of a line meant all the phonetic facts, no two lines would scan the same way. Meter is another matter. It is an ordering of language by means of an extremely limited subset of its characteristics. In English the language is ordered by syllabic stress. All other aspects of language are present, indeed they are vital to the rhythm of the verse. But they are not ordered by the meter. However, marking stress is not the same as marking meter. A perfectly regular line of iambic pentameter may have anywhere from 2 to 9 stresses, but it is still felt to exhibit 5 pulses or beats. This can most easily be understood through the principle of relative stress. An unstressed syllable between two even slightly weaker syllables may be perceived as a beat. And the reverse is true of a stressed syllable between two even slightly stronger syllables. These phenomena are called promotion and demotion. Thus a syllable, regardless of its level of stress, that realizes a beat is ictic. And a syllable, regardless of its level of stress, that does not is nonictic. Ictus refers to the position within a line that is experienced as a beat, or to the syllable that fills it. TVF Brogan issues a stern warning about the temptations of overly detailed scansion. Since meter is a system of binary oppositions in which syllables are either marked or unmarked, a binary code is all that is necessary to transcribe it. It is natural to want to enrich scansion with other kinds of analyses which capture more of the phonological and syntactic structure of the line. But all such efforts exceed the boundary of strict metrical analysis, moving into descriptions of linguistic rhythm, and thus serve to blur or dissolve the distinction between meter and rhythm. Strictly speaking, scansion marks which syllables are metrically prominent, that is ictus and non-ictus, not how much. Scansions which take account of more levels of metrical degree than two, or intonation, or the timing of syllables are all guilty of overspecification. Prosodists seldom explicitly state what they are marking in their scansions. For clarity, scansions that mark only ictus and non-ictus will be called metrical scansions, and those which mark stress or other linguistic characteristics will be called rhythmic scansions. Elements: minimally, graphic scansion requires only 2 symbols, designating ictic and non-ictic syllables. These symbols are typically placed over the first vowel in every syllable. Some prosodists indicate only ictic syllables, but this is not ideal since the number, position, and character of non-ictic syllables is also metrically significant. Additionally, many prosodists divide a line into theta euro the minimal repeated unita euro using the pipe symbol. When feet are thus designated, words that span feet are divided without hyphens, and any punctuation that occurs at a foot break is typically omitted. A slasher, 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 slash. When I consider how my light is spent, not all prosodists agree that foot scansion is helpful. For example, in trisyllabic measures it is often quite arbitrary where one divides the feet, and the salient fact seems to be the number of non-ictic syllables euro in this case 2 euro between each ictus, rather than whether the repeated pattern is imagined as slash, a, slasher, or slash a. Foot analysis tends to imply that there is a special relationship among syllables within feet which does not apply across feet, but this is doubtful. Furthermore, iambic pentameter may be better described as a series of 10 positions than of 5 feet, especially since the sequence A may be interpreted as the swapping of ictic and non-ictic positions across feet, suggesting that if feet constitute any kind of boundary at all, it is a porous one indeed. Finally, a caesura may be indicated. In the great majority of verse in English, caesurae are not part of the metrical pattern, and generally it is better not to include them in English scansion. If they are to be marked, if feet are being marked with a pipe, then caesurae will be marked with a double pipe and will replace the foot marker when they occur in the same place. If feet are not marked, then caesurae may be marked with a single pipe. The 14er typically does have a metrical caesura. Examples of style and are shown below. A slasher, 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 slash, 1, the princely palace of the sun stood gorgeous to behold, a slasher, 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 slash, 2, on stately pillars builded high of yellow burnished gold. Common 2-3 and 4 level notations. Equals 2 level notations equals, metrical scansion explicitly requires a 2-level notation. Because of the variety of stress levels in language, 2-level notation is not adequate for a rhythmic scansion of any sensitivity. Yet, because of the confusion between rhythm and meter, the number of levels used is no sure indication of a prosodist's intent. Classical: this notation simply retains the classical symbols for long and short syllables and repurposes them for ictic and non-ictic. Because it quite literally doesn't mean what it says, it is generally out of favor with metrists. This notation has been used by George Saintsbury and Edgar Allan Poe. Slash and breve: this notation replaces the macron with a slash, the more common symbol for either ictus or stress. Though the classical breve is still present, its pairing with slash indicates that it has been relieved of its original short meaning. This notation has the advantage that its symbols can be incorporated into words as diacritics. But strictly speaking, it can be seen as sending the mixed message that syllables are being marked as stressed or short, which would be a nonsensical scansion. This notation has been used by Paul Fussell and Miller Williams. Slash and x: this notation is unambiguous, easy to type, and frequently used. This is the notation preferred by the Poetry Wiki project for Wikipedia articles displaying scansion. It cannot be utilized as diacritics, and therefore always requires 2 lines. This notation has been used by James Macaulay, Timothy Steele, Robert B. Shaw, and the Princeton Encyclopedia of Poetry and Poetics. And as a secondary method by Derek Atridge. A slasher, 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 slash, when Ajax strives, some rocks fast wait to throw, a slasher, 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 slash, the line 2 labors, and the words move slow. This metrical scansion does not attempt to show the various rhythmic features that would occur in a competent reading. Nor does it imply that the line should be read monotonously in only 2 registers. Its simple function is to show how these lines relate to other lines of verse by marking whether syllables fill ictic or non-ictic positions in the line. Equals 3-level notations equals, although both lines of Pope quoted above are metrically identical regular pentameters, they create that same basic metrical pattern in very different ways. To show this, one must note the rhythm, not just the meter, of the lines, and recourse must be had to additional levels of notation. In the instance below, the third symbol designates stressed but demoted syllables. A slasher, slash backslash slash backslash slasher, slash, when Ajax strives, some rocks fast wait to throw, a slash backslash slash a slash backslash slash, the line 2 labors, and the words move slow. If the meanings of all 3 symbols are defined and used strictly enough, a 3-level scansion can be both metrical and rhythmic. However, typically it will gravitate toward the rhythmic, as the scansion does. In the second line, and is both unstressed and ictic, but the scansion marks it only as unstressed. Although this is now a better representation of the rhythm of the line, Brogan's chickens have come home to roost, the first line's 3-level scansion may tend to obscure the basic metrical pattern, but the second line's scansion actually falsifies it. Enid Hammer's notation has also been used by Harvey Gross and Suzanne Woods, and it is the graphical basis for Derek Attridge's more complex notation. Four-level notations equals. Four-level scansion is generally a sign of a more linguistically oriented prosodist at work. Otto Jespersen introduced his numeric notation in 1900. He occasionally added a fifth level, indicating a fully stressed syllable further emphasized by phrasal stress. In 1951 Trager and Smith posited 4 phonemic levels of stress in English. This was in a broad linguistic context, not specifically pertaining to verse. Nevertheless, in the 1950s and 1960s linguistically oriented prosodists attempted to use these 4 levels of stress to formulate a fuller explanation of meter. Chomsky and Halley's work did not specifically address verse, but their notation of stress was also influential. Chomsky and Halley posited more than 4 levels of stress, but typically only 4 are used in scansion. In addition to 4 levels of stress, Trager and Smith posited 4 levels of pitch, and 4 levels of juncture. All 3 suprasegmentals have been used by prosodists to map out lines of verse. This comes about as close to C.S. Lewis's All the Phonetic Facts as possible, and constitutes, neither the meter nor even the phonetic facts of the text, but a transcription of one reading of the text. Here superscript numerals indicate pitch, and vertical bar and pound indicate juncture. E/E/E/E/E/ R squared there was R cubed never a sound a squared R squared beside the wood is squared R squared but a cubed one. Jespersen was not the first to use numerals to mark stress, Alexander John Ellis used them as early as 1873. Nor were W.K. Wimsott and Munro Beardsley the first to use multiple slashes, none other than Thomas Jefferson used a 5-level notational system of accents. Steele and Macaulay have used Jespersen's 4-level notation as a secondary method. Wimsott, Woods, and the New Princeton Encyclopedia of Poetry and Poetics have used Chomsky and Halley's notation as a secondary method. One of the primary virtues of 4-level scansion is that it helps clarify a surprisingly specific and surprisingly controversial debate. Take the rhythmically complex line. When to the sessions of sweet silent thought, some prosodists hear ions of sweet C as a very light iamb, followed by a very heavy iamb, yielding a 2-level metrical scansion of /a, slasher, 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 slash, when to the sessions of sweet C length thought. Foot markers are used here merely to emphasize the syllables in question. Recall that this metrical scansion does not imply that it is necessarily spoken with more emphasis than sweet, only that these phylactic and nonictic positions, respectively. However, other prosodists hold that, just as the usual second position ictus has been switched to first position, so the usual sixth position ictus has been switched to seventh, yielding /a, /slasher, slash, when to the sessions of sweet C length thought. In this case, ions of sweet C is sometimes taken as a pyrrhic foot followed by a spondee, and sometimes as a single 4-syllable unit that replaces 2 iambic feet. This is a case in which 2-level scansion is felt to miss something essential even by some rather strict prosodists. In fact, Groves has shown that in cases like this, where the ictus moves forward, each of the 4 positions in question has slightly different constraints that must be fulfilled for the line to be perceived as metrical. In layman's terms, these constraints are most often realized as 4 rising positions. In Jespersen's notation, 3-2-1-4-1-2-3-4-1-4, when to the sessions of sweet C length thought. In this case, everyone is somewhat right, the 4 positions are like a light then a heavy iamb, and like a pyrrhic followed by a spondee, and like a 4-syllable ascending foot that functions as a unit. Rhythmimetrical scansion. The 2 main approaches to scansion result in a conundrum. Metrical scansion necessarily ignores significant differences in stress, the very signal the meter orders. Yet rhythmic scansion obscures meter and tends to be overly subjective. Jespersen provided the components of a solution to this problem by both marking multiple levels of syllable stress, and defining the meter of iambic pentameter as a series of 10 syllabic positions, differentiated by rising or falling levels of stress. Numeric stress levels are as described above, and A and B represent weak and strong positions in the line. Alternatively AB represent relatively stressed or unstressed positions, where the slash and backslash simply indicate stress levels increasing or decreasing. 1, 2 4 1 4 3 4 3 4 1 4, when Ajax strives, some rock's vast weight to throw. 2, a b. 1, 1 4 3 4 1 2 1 4 3 4, the line 2 labors, and the words move slow. 3, a slash b backslash a slash b backslash a slash b backslash a slash b backslash a slash b. However, Jespersen did not fully integrate his notation. It remained for the Russian linguistic statistical school to systematize it. In their 1968 study of Russian verse, A.N. Kolmogorov and A.V. Prokhorov used a system which made both stress and ictus explicit simultaneously. This basic approach has subsequently been used to scan English verse by Marina Tarlinska-Jar, Derek Atridge, and Peter L. Groves, though their systems differ in detail and purpose. In addition to making rhythm and meter distinct, all three prosodists provide explicit rules for assigning stress levels so that, as far as possible, this becomes an objective process driven by lexicon and syntax, rather than depending upon the ear of the scanner. Their works must be consulted for details, but a simplified version of Groves's rules can provide a first approximation. Primary stress, the primarily stressed syllable and content words. Secondary stress, the secondarily stressed syllables of polysyllabic content words. The most strongly stressed syllable in polysyllabic function words. Subsidiary stress in compound words. Unstressed syllables of polysyllabic words. Monosyllabic function words. For comparative purposes, the following table is a somewhat simplified rendition of these scansion systems. Atridge and Groves scan ictus non-ictus on a separate line. Tarlinska-Jar, Atridge, and Groves each exhibit distinct conceptions regarding the dispositions of ictus and non-ictus. Marina Tarlinska-Jar Tarlinska-Jar uses Scansion as a basis for statistical analysis of verse. She has used several versions of the Scansion levels shown above, some more and some less fine-grained, and some reduced to numerical values. But all relate to this basic 3-2 structure. In the metrical component of her Scansion, she marks the ictic and non-ictic positions of the meter, not of the line. This allows her to compare patterns across hundreds or thousands of verse lines statistically, using a consistent matrix of positions. Thus in the line AA-yen went to the sessions of Sweet Silent Thought. Where both Atridge and Groves would say that the first syllable is ictic, Tarlinska-Jar rigidly keeps the ictus in the second position, which is its average position across iambic pentameter. Derek Atridge Atridge's Scansion is intended to be broadly applicable, using a few symbols and rules to describe a wide range of English lines consistently, without a priori reducing them to one metrical system. Like Tarlinska-Jar, he considers that ictus and non-ictus always alternate, but matches beats to prominent syllables by allowing off-beat positions to be filled by 0, 1, or 2 syllables. The top line represents his single-line Scansion from 1995, and the lower lines uses his original two-line system of 1982. /XX/XX/X/X/ went to the sessions of Sweet Silent Thought, plus SSS plus SSS plus S plus SS plus S, BCBCB a BOB. Peter L. Groves to date, Groves has put forward his system only as an explanation of iambic pentameter, though elements may be applicable to other accentual syllabic meters. He begins his rhythmic Scansion with a 3-level label for all syllables, but goes much further by elaborating rules describing how contiguous syllables impinge upon each other. The result is a map of the lexical and syntactic character of a line's syllables, which results in stress, rather than a representation of stress levels themselves. Ictus and non-ictus have constraints on which syllable statuses can fill them. These rules for matching syllable status and metrical position are called mapping rules, and strict versus loose styles of iambic pentameter can be defined by applying different mapping rules. Further, while his metrical scansion begins as a familiar WSWSWSWSWSWS, he allows W and S to trade places under certain conditions, and when they do their mapping rules are altered, requiring additional symbols. In the first line of scansion, syllables that impinge on their neighbors are connected by hyphens. In the second line, positions that have switched places and therefore altered their mapping rules are connected by hyphens. When to the sessions of sweet silent thought, OOEO, A, OOEAOA, SHWWSWWSSWS. Other methods of scansion. Musical scansion. In 1880, Sidney Lanier published The Science of English Verse, in which he developed a novel theory exploring the connections between musical notation and meter in poetry. This has not always been viewed kindly. For example, Vladimir Nabokov in his notes on prosody says, "In my casual perusals, I have of course slammed shut without further ado any such works on English prosody in which I glimpsed a crop of musical notes." Robert Bridges George R. Stewart Stewart's notation influenced John Crowe Ransom and John Thompson, though they did not use his full roster of symbols. Generative metrics. Notes, Lewis 1969, p. 280. Steele 1999, pages 30-31. TVF Brogan, Scansion in Brogan, p. 1118. John Milton, On His Blindness line 1. Edward Bish, whose art of English poetry was quite popular throughout the 18th century, was probably the earliest influential prosodist to deny that feet play a part in English verse. Though George R. Stewart used foot terminology to describe verse, his scansion ignored feet, concentrating instead on syntactic groupings. Most modern dissent, however, can be seen in terms of Atridge S. Berson's resolute denial of the fallacy of the foot. He described verse lines instead as a series of weak and strong positions, and both generative metrists and metrical scanners have generally followed in his anti-footsteps. Halley and Keyser dismissed the foot, their signal concept, the stress maximum explicitly transcending its boundaries. Paul Kiparsky however reinstates the concept of the foot. Derek Atridge says, At best, then, the division of lines into feet adds nothing. At worst it hinders accurate analysis of the metrical variations which all readers perceive. Alone among the metrical scanners, Peter L. Groves reintroduces notional feet at a very general level, but he distances his notion from that of traditional metrics. TVF Brogan threads the needle, saying that the foot is more than a mere analytic tool, a device of scansion. It is a principle of structure, yet that it is not necessarily an element in poetic composition. And it is almost certainly not an element of performance. And finally that, in scansion, it can be used to describe and analyze verse whose regularities support it, and not verse which does not. Arthur Golding, Arvid's Metamorphoses Book 2, lines 1-2. Alexander Pope, An Essay on Criticism, lines 370-71. Robert Frost, Mowing, line 1. Quoted and scanned in Chapman 1956, p. 86. Jefferson 1786. William Shakespeare, Sonnet 30, line 1. Groves 1998, pages 108, 133-34, 137-38. Tarlins Kajar 1976, pages 78-83. But C. Macaulay 1966, pages 28-39 for an earlier and similar, if simplified, discussion. Groves 1998, pages 61-2, 112. As scanned by Atridge 1982, p. 261. As scanned by Groves 1998, p. 146. References: Atridge, Derek, The Rhythms of English Poetry, New York, Longman, ISBN 0-582-55105-6, Atridge, Derek, Poetic Rhythm, An Introduction, Cambridge, Cambridge University Press, ISBN 0-521-42369-4, Bridges, Robert, Milton's Prosody, with a chapter on accentual verse and notes, Oxford, Clarendon Press, Brogan, TVF, 1981, English versification, 1570 1980, a reference guide with a global appendix, Baltimore, Johns Hopkins University Press, ISBN 0-8018-2541-5, Chapman, Seymour, 1956, Robert Frost's Mowing an Inquiry into Prosodic Structure, in Hemphill, George, Discussions of Poetry, Rhythm and Sound, Boston, D.C. Heath, pages 83-92, Chomsky, Noam. Halley, Morris, The Sound Pattern of English, New York, Harper and Row, Korn, Alfred, The Poem's Heartbeat, A Manual of Prosody, Port Townsend, Washington, Copper Canyon Press, ISBN 978-1-55659-281-2, Fussell, Paul, Poetic Meter and Poetic Form, New York, Random House, Groves, Peter L., Strange Music, The Meter of the English Heroic Line, ELS Monograph Series No. 74, Victoria, British Columbia, University of Victoria, ISBN 0-920604-55-2, Halley. Morris. Keyser, Samuel J., English 3, The Iambic Pentameter, in Wimsott, W.K., Versification, Major Language Types, New York, New York University Press, pages 217-237, ISBN 08147-9155-7, Hammer, Enid, The Meters of English Poetry, London, Methuen, Hollander, John, Vision and Resonance, Two Senses of Poetic Form, New York, Oxford University Press, ISBN 0-19-501898-2, Jefferson, Thomas, 1786, Thoughts on English Prosody, in Hemphill, George, Discussions of Poetry, Rhythm and Sound, Boston, D.C. Heath, pages 20-25, Jespersen, Otto, 1933, Notes on Meter, in Gross, Harvey, The Structure of Verse, New York, The Echo Press, pages 105-128, ISBN 0-912946-58-X, Lewis, C.S., Meter, Selected Literary Essays, Cambridge, Cambridge University Press, pages 280-285, Macaulay, James, Versification, A Short Introduction, Michigan State University Press, Breminger, Alex. Brogan, TVF, eds., The New Princeton Encyclopedia of Poetry and Poetics, New York, MJF Books, ISBN 1-56731-152-0, Steele, Timothy, All the Fun's in How You Say a Thing, Athens, Ohio, Ohio University Press, ISBN 0-8214-1260-4, Stewart, George R., The Technique of English Verse, Holt, Reinhardt and Winston, Tarlins Kajar, Marina, English Verse, Theory and History, The Hague, Mouton, ISBN 90-279-3295-6, Tarlins Kajar, Marina, Shakespeare's Verse, Iambic Pentameter. And the Poet's Idiosyncrasies, New York, Peter Lang, ISBN 0-8204-0344-X, Trager, George L. Smith, Henry Lee, 1951, An Outline of English Structure, Washington, D.C., American Council of Learned Societies, Turco, Louis, The New Book of Forms, A Handbook of Poetics, Hanover, New Hampshire, University Press of New England, ISBN 0-87451-381-2, Woods, Suzanne, Natural Emphasis, English Versification from Chaucer to Dryden, San Marino, The Huntington Library, ISBN 0-87328-085-7, Wright, George T., Shakespeare's Metrical Art, Berkeley, California, University of California Press, ISBN 0-520-07642-7.